So today we're going to dig into a company that's right at the heart of India's big tech ambitions, Tejas Networks. Now, this company is backed by the giant Tata Group, and they just had a year that, well, it made everyone in the industry sit up and pay attention. So the big question is, is this the start of a real global contender, or is it more of a flash in the pan? Let's break down the numbers and figure out if this is India's next tech giant or just a shooting star. All right, let's just jump right in with the number that is making jaws drop everywhere. In just one single year, fiscal 2025, Tejas Networks grew its revenue by 261%. And no, I'm not kidding. That's not a typo. And that, of course, leads to the big question we're trying to answer here. How on earth does something like that even happen? I mean, we're not talking about a software startup here. This is a high-tech hardware company. What could possibly cause that kind of, meteoric rise? Well, the answer comes down to one single massive project. Tejas landed a monumental deal with India's state-owned telecom, BSNL. The job? To deploy a staggering 100,000, that's right, 100,000 4G and 5G cell sites across the country. Yep, one project changed absolutely everything. So how does a company like this actually operate? It's a pretty smart business model, actually. They focus on what you'd call the high-value stuff. All the in-house R&D, designing the gear, and owning the intellectual property, the brains of the operation. Then they outsource the actual manufacturing, the heavy lifting, to other companies. And this is key, because it lets them be super agile and scale up in a massive way when they need to, which, as you'll see, is exactly what happened. Okay, with that context, let's dive into the bull case. The optimistic view. What's the argument that this incredible growth is just the beginning for Tejas? Let's take a look. And wow, this chart really tells the story, doesn't it? Just look at that jump. We're talking about going from around 900 crore rupees to nearly 9,000 crores in just 2 years. And to put that into perspective for you, that last bar, that's over $1 billion in revenue. This wasn't just a big win. It was proof that they could handle a project on an absolutely massive scale. And that giant wave of revenue, it did a lot more than just look good on a chart. It completely flipped their entire financial story. Think about it. They went from losing money, a 36 crore loss, to posting a very healthy profit of over 440 crore rupees. It's a textbook example of what finance folks call operating leverage. Basically, once your basic costs are covered, a huge chunk of every new sale drops straight down to profit. So what are the real strengths powering this whole thing? Well, first, and this is a big one, they're backed by the Tata Group. I mean, that's one of India's biggest and most respected names, which gives them instant credibility and serious financial muscle. On top of that, you've got their own homegrown tech, a really competitive cost model, and, this whole global shift towards wanting trusted vendors from democratic countries. You put all that together, and that's a pretty powerful mix. But there's always a but, right? An explosion that big, that fast, it always leaves some questions. And when you start to dig a little deeper, you begin to see a few red flags that are making some investors, well, a little nervous. So let's look at the other side of the coin, the bear case. Okay, this chart right here really puts that incredible growth into a whole new light. In that record-breaking year, a full 97% of their revenue came from India. And almost all of that was from that one single BSNL project we talked about. Now that is what's known as a huge concentration risk. Now, to pull off a project that huge, you need a massive amount of cash upfront, right? You got to pay for parts, for labor, all that stuff long before your customer pays you. So to manage all that, the company had to take on a lot of debt. We're talking over 3,200 crore rupees in borrowings. That is a pretty heavy weight to have on the books.
And then came the very next quarter, right after those fantastic results. And what happened? A net loss of 194 crore rupees. The company said it was due to project delays. But of course, this immediately raised some big questions. Was that perfect execution on the BSNL project something they can do again and again? Or was it just a one-off?
And then, to top it all off, something else happened. Right when the company needed to pivot from this huge domestic project to a real global growth strategy, its MD and CEO resigned. Now, sure, a co-founder has stepped in, but that creates a leadership vacuum. And it's happening at what you could argue is the most critical growth phase in the company's history. So, okay, we've got these two really powerful but competing narratives, don't we? On one hand, you have this incredible success story, but on the other, you have some very serious risks. So, how do we weigh these against each other? Let's try and come to a verdict. All right, let's put it all side by side for the final showdown. The investment positives? They're big and strategic, right? You've got the powerful Tata backing, their own proprietary tech, a huge global market to go after, and supportive national policies. Then you look at the concerns and they feel a lot more immediate. Heavy reliance on that one BSNL contract, a lot of debt, the recent CEO departure, and just this general risk around execution and profitability. So when you weigh all that, Tejas Networks really becomes the textbook definition of a high-risk, high-reward investment. The potential upside here is massive if, and it's a big if, they can take this domestic success and go global. But the risk is also very real if that BSNL project just ends up being a one-hit wonder. Okay, so if you're following this story, what are the key signals you should be watching for? It really boils down to three main things. Number one, major international contract wins. They absolutely have to prove they can sell outside of India. Number two, consistent quarterly profitability. No more surprise losses. And number three, just plain better project execution, without the kinds of delays we've seen recently.
And that really leaves us with the billion-dollar question, doesn't it? The BSNL deal gave Tejas Networks a massive platform. It proved its capabilities on a national stage. But was that the final act, or was it just the dress rehearsal for a true global performance? The next few years are going to tell us the whole story.